Hey everyone, we are 16 days away from the launch of Finding Hazleton, my debut novel. I've been receiving some questions from people, and I thought I would take a minute and make a video to answer some of those questions. They fall into three basic categories. One, why the heck did you decide to write a book? What made you think that you can write a book? Um, what's it about? And finally, and I get this one most often, is it a true story? In other words, should anybody be worried about what you're writing in the book? So I figured I would take a minute and just go over the answer to all of those questions. Okay, so first of all, why did you write a book, or what made you think that you could write a book? I really didn't think that I could. It was sort of a bucket list for me for a while. I've always enjoyed a good story, a story that moves you, a story that makes you laugh and makes you cry, a story that makes you think about it long after it's done being told. And I've always been envious of people who could do that, whether it was a book, a TV show, a movie. And I guess there was this egotistical side of me that said, hey, I could do that, which may or may not be true. I guess that's yet to be determined when Finding Hazleton comes out. But it started off with just, I wanted to see if I could write a chapter. So I sat down and I typed for a couple hours and made a chapter. And then something strange happened. When I went to sleep, in my mind, I started thinking and dreaming of what the next chapter would be. So I woke up the next day and figured, hey, let me just continue this with chapter 2. And that happened for a couple chapters. And then probably the most interesting thing happened. This was about a third of the way through. I had written maybe 12, 15 chapters. And all of a sudden, the characters started telling the story themselves. That sounds crazy. I may be crazy, but it happened. I had ideas of where I thought the characters were going to go in this. And all of a sudden, around that 12 chapter mark, they decided they were going in different places. And it was almost as if while I was typing, my hands became possessed by the characters. And they started going in different directions that I never thought of. And it was a little bit creepy, but it was very interesting as well. And that's when I really started thinking I might be able to get through this and finish it. And that leads me to, the best part of it was after a couple years, finally typing the last word, which, if anybody's wondering, the last word of the book is life, which I think is appropriate. And finishing that and knowing that I had completed the book. Granted, it may stink. It may be the most awful attempt at fiction writing ever, but I did it and I completed it and it's finished. And this book, Finding Hazleton, will be on my bookshelf in my house for the rest of my life. And whether it's good or bad, it's going to be an accomplishment, a bucket list thing that I was able to do. And it was very fulfilling. So what's it about? In a nutshell, it's a coming of age story. It's a nostalgic tale of friendship, young love, tragic loss, and redemption, and it's told through a series of flashbacks. I often find myself reminiscing about my childhood, days growing up, old friends that I had, what we went through, and I try to piece together the path of how did I turn from that young kid into the adult that I am today. When did that change happen? I know that it didn't happen in an instant, but there was a crossover. There was a turning point of when you kind of leave your childhood behind and you enter into adulthood. And I think that that's something common to all of us. I think we all find ourselves from time to time thinking back at how that transition took place. And that's kind of a theme throughout this story, is that transition. For myself, when I think about that transition, I think about my first 2 years at college at Penn State Hazleton. That's why the book is set in Hazleton, because my transformation, my coming of age story, I think kind of started there. And so it was a fitting place for me to set the book. Okay, so now to the question that I've been asked the most often, and I guess the most important one. Should anybody be worried about what I'm writing in this book? No, this is a complete and total work of fiction. It is not a life story. It is not a memoir. While I took inspiration from personalities of friends and family members as I grew up, None of the characters in this are real life characters, and none of the situations or stories are identical to my life or to anybody's life, who I grew up with. So nothing to worry about. However, I do think that anybody who I was friends with during my high school days or college days, you will find some familiar settings. You'll find some familiar locations and sights and sounds. And I think that it will be a fun, nostalgic look back um, into the 80s and the 90s. A look back that I hope will make everybody smile and maybe even tear up a little bit. Um, One of the interesting things that happened to me as I was writing the book, there were some parts where I just thought, man, I really stink as a writer, and then there were some parts that I thought were really good, and I actually started tearing up at one particular scene as I was writing it, tearing up at my own story. So yes, again, I know that sounds insane, um, but hopefully you will all find some of that same emotion in it as well. And I look forward to hearing everybody's feedback, and I hope you all enjoy Finding Hazleton, coming out on June 21st.